We are here to celebrate the launch of Swimming in Gilead by Cassie Premo Steele. Cassie is a lesbian ecofeminist poet and novelist and the author of 18 books. Swimming in Gilead is her 7th book of poetry, and her poetry has won numerous awards, including the Archibald Rutledge Prize, named after the first poet laureate of South Carolina. Welcome, Cassie.
Thank you, Casey, and thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate your presence. I appreciate Casey being our host this evening. I want to thank Yellow Arrow Publishing in Baltimore that has published Swimming in Gilead. If you don't have a copy yet, there is a link in the chat for that, but you can also find it at Yellow Arrow. I want to especially thank all of my friends and family who are here, as well as the Sisters of Gilead, who you will hear about more as we continue with the evening. So about half of our gathering tonight will be me reading and talking about the poetry in the collection, and then Casey and I will engage in a discussion, and if you have any questions or comments, you can feel free to put those in the chat or just raise your hand, and hopefully this will be a dialogue in the second half of our hour together. People often ask me, what does Gilead mean? It has many meanings, but literally in Hebrew, it means a heap of stones of testimony. So it has the meaning of witnessing, but also heaviness with the earth. This book was written as a testimony to the times that we are living in, of white supremacy, police violence, immigration injustice, pandemic incompetence, loss of LGBTQ rights, and women's bodily autonomy being taken away. So the first 2 poems I'll share tonight bear witness to that. That's a heap of pain, but what poetry does is it allows us to bear it with beauty. The first poem is called Stay or Go. And all of these poems were written with my writing group. We call ourselves the Sisters of Gilead, and I will share more about that as the night goes on. Stay or go. The thing is that when faced with this question, it's not a question. When confronted with this choice, it's not a choice. We imagine it as such only when we are far removed from it. But when it happens to you, you know, you must go. That's always the decision you make. As much fear and terror as you have, the heartbreak and uncertainty, the regrets and wishing, and all the tears. You put one foot in front of another and go, because the body can only take so much. Violence and yelling and hunger and shooting and air sirens and bombs and guns in the streets. After a time, the body sends a signal to the mind, danger, warning, cannot cope. And so you go. You make the call, you get in line, you wait, you go, and you keep going, just as every other immigrant, refugee, battered spouse, and abused child has done at one time or another. You are not alone. Meet us here on the road. We have more than enough food and fresh water that we can share with you. Together, we will welcome you to your new home. And the next poem is called Go. Walk the path where grasses grow, or take the crooked one with bare toes, or jump or crawl or run or go. Movement is not an option. It's a lifelong collaboration. Earth is a partner with gravity. Everything learns to let go. And we keep going after loss and death and pain and this yearning, split, gap inside. Life begins in such a hole. It crawls out to be born. We are always being born. We leave behind our torn parts and become lizards. This is not to say you won't rest. Even the moon has nights off, but keep going. Go over barbed wires, under fences, around walls. Sneak past the patrols, hide in the alleyways. Your freedom is waiting. Walk the path beyond hating. Go to where long grasses grow. So this book is a book of witness, and there are many levels to witnessing. At one level, it means to hear the story of pain or loss or trauma from another, and to participate emotionally in their grief and rage with them. This is what we do when we listen to poetry, and I'm grateful for that, for you here. But witnessing also means to tell the truth of your own story. And this next poem reveals this. It's called My Lifelines. I'm blanking on the name of the show, but I remember with my stepdaughter Laura, we used to watch some game show where they had lifelines that they could call. So that's what I was thinking of when I named this poem. Sometimes I am drowning in a lake of my own making. It is I who turned on the taps before bed, I who dumped everything from the freezer to melt, I who opened the windows when storms were stirring, I who poured the whiskey and wine on the floor. Crying out for help, I take off my life vest and tie my hands behind my back and stuff boulders into my bra, but not in that precise order, obviously. And then I laugh because my lifelines are in my own hands. I've always known that. And what I really want is company, someone to fix a leaky pipe for me, or watch the weather report, or eat my defrosted dinner with me, or toast to our life together. And you, yes, you have always been there. You are with me all the time, and all I have to do is to pay close attention to this life of mine. The you in that poem is my wife, Suzanne, who is always there with me in my heart, and particularly since the pandemic, we both work from home together, so we are together all the time. And so one of the things that I was thinking about as I was gathering poems for tonight is that the kind of love that she and I share as married partners is being used right now by people in power by using fear of the other as a way up to fire up anger and augment their own power. The word enemy comes from the Latin, not a friend, en ami. So in the face of that weaponization of our love and our relationship, I believe that it's important to bear witness not only to atrocities and pain and loss, but also to what this kind of friendship and love and marriage and equality really mean. So the next poem is called Marriage Equality. Love is love and lays herself down for lips and skin and thighs and the orange peel wrinkle of small and secret places inside. Love is not a breaking, not something hurt, not cracked or chipped, nor lacking any pieces. Love is full and filling, a deep breath opening, that tear afterward falling, and the yes of being together, even when alone. Love is the drumbeat to the songs of chrysalis and seed, storm and spring, letting go to welcome summer heat. Love is sweet, like just shucked corn, ending with the drip of watermelon fresh on our tongues under blue sky. Love brings autumn water to usher in the next weather when one season is ready to be torn. Love is pump and touch, engine and combustion, burst and beginning, a volcano from which life is born. The next poem is about Generation X, which I'm proudly part of. I think of us as the X chromosome that ushered in the difference between the boomers and the millennials and gave birth to the fluidity, fecundity, and fertile creativity that we feel in our society now that many people will fight over, but is life. This is called Her Answer to Gen X. Oh, generous one gender, so fluid and shifting. One moment, a mushroom standing up in the damp ash. The next, an ocean rolling over red rocks until crash. Oh, genres, so many, poetry and story, research and song, essay and aphorism, each with its form, allowing multiplicity of voice and vision, endlessly being born. Oh, generations past and those to come, the ones here with us now, and babies waiting with grannies gone, collecting knowledge in a woven basket, ready to be passed on. Oh, genius, the spark of mind that writes and grows, shares and knows, loves us all abundantly, fearlessly, generously. The next poem is in the center of the book. For those of you who missed at the beginning, this is what the cover looks like. And so halfway between the beginning and the end is this poem, which is, for me, in some ways, the central poem of the book itself, in that it connects both the autobiographical and the collective meanings of trauma, as we've been talking about. And also, it provides a bridge for us to conceive of and reconceive of ourselves after such trauma. It's called This Is How We. I once knew a Native woman, Eastern Cherokee, who taught me that in order to fix a rip in a basket, you can't just go in after it. You have to unwind the fibers until it's pine straw and sweetgrass again. This is how we begin again. I once injured my left knee, and the physical therapist, a Latina from Texas, showed me how a lack of stability in my right hip caused it. The body crosses like this, she said. It's all connected. This is how we heal again. I once lay on my bed for hours on end as a child in Minnesota, reading book after book while my body disappeared, and so did the pain and fear, until I was just a mind in a story. It took me years to invite my body back into the party. This is how we move again. I once stayed in endless motion of serving and cleaning, cooking and feeding, wiping and washing, drying and folding, until my mind, always so strong, broke hard and long, and for the first time, I told the truth in therapy. This is how we feel again. I once heard a song that felt like it was singing all that had gone wrong, and I thought it had been written just for me. And then a pandemic broke the globe, and I realized everybody knows the melody of tragedy. This is how we begin to be together for the first time, really. I'll share two more poems before we begin our discussion. And the next one I want to dedicate to Cassie, who is our host and my interlocutor tonight. I've known Cassie for many years, and we have written and worked together many times. And I wrote this poem after reading tarot cards for her. So it's called Her Tarot Reading. As I read it, I want you to imagine that I'm reading your tarot as well. The significator is a woman on fire. Burn the papers. Burn the past. Don't burn out. You are here to last. What is passing away is doubt. Scream. Shout. Say it out loud. You don't deserve that crowd. What is arriving is water. Swim. Float. Let yourself flow. Be your own boat. What is above is the sun. Smile. Dance. Light up with fun. You are nowhere near done. What is below is a rock. Stand, sit, balance the move and the stop. You are already on top. And finally, the next poem is dedicated to all of you who are here tonight, especially my Sisters of Gilead. All of these poems were written while in sitting is the best way to say it, weekly with women that I met through a course given by Natalie Goldberg. And 3 of the women live in Canada and 3 in the United States. And particularly during the pandemic, when the United States was not handling things well, the women from Canada were able to witness to what we were experiencing here in a way that really shook me, shook all of us, I think. And we realized that a person cannot witness to or even feel the feelings associated with a trauma while they're in the event. It often takes someone from the outside to be able to feel those feelings and mirror that. And so we started calling ourselves the Sisters of Gilead, taking the phrase from Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, where the US was Gilead, and if we wanted freedom, we would escape to Canada. So I think my friends Lantian, Shirley, and I think Mona are here tonight. The other women in the Sisters of Gilead are Colleen and Vanessa. So I dedicate this to them, and also my writing friends Melissa Seligman and Amy Alley, who is also a painter, and the title of her painting, She Walks Two Worlds, inspired my last poem for tonight. She walks two worlds. She walks two worlds when she walks, one foot on earth and the other in sky. Her mind is the balance where feathers fly off and on, depending on the weather or the storms in her heart. She is a tightrope walker, a trapeze artist, a daredevil kissed by angels. She sleeps midday, rocked by the lullabies of hawks. She speaks in the dark to the moon and keeps her secrets locked in a pastel room. She creates waves with eyelashes and composes symphonies with plastic glasses, and she loves the sound of silence above everything, the way the breath rings in the bell tower of her chest. Her heart is different from the rest. It feels with an intensity that leaves the word courage breathless. Her body is the interpreter of languages between earth and sky, and every line is part of a poem she is writing as she walks, her feet rising and falling, her steps beginning and ending, her body living and dying in this world where beauty is another word for goodbye. Thank you all so much for listening. And now we will turn to Cassie, and she will lead us through a discussion. If you have questions or comments that you'd like to put in the chat, feel free to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Cassie, so much for that gorgeous reading. It's always a treat to hear you read. Thanks for my dedicated poem. I appreciate it. That's a special one for me. I want to start with something that you talked about as you were reading, and it's really clear in this collection, and also something that I've really admired about your writing. And this is something that's true about your poetry. It's what makes you a really great essayist, a great academic writer, but you do such a superb job of balancing that internal voice, of that witnessing of yourself, of telling your story and claiming it, and it's unique and it's yours, while putting it in that context so that you can connect with readers into the larger issues. And I was just wondering how you found that balance, and in a technical sense, how do you do that as a writer? Because that's something we talk about a lot in this class.
Sure. This hasn't always been true. When I was younger, I was very impatient, and I loved closure. So I wake up early in the morning to write often. And if I would start on a poem or an essay or a piece of writing, I would want closure before I finished. And there was a kind of pressure to that, a kind of fire. I would call it maybe a lack of care for the self in that. So as years have gone on, I've learned to pause with myself. So I not only pause in the writing, I give myself smaller assignments. Each of the poems was written, as I said, with the Sisters of Gilead, and the way that we write is we take turns being the leader, and we give a prompt, and then we write for 10 minutes, and then we read to each other without commenting. And this method comes from the teaching of Natalie Goldberg, who says that if you learn to tell the truth to yourself in the writing, you can begin to tell the truth to yourself in life. So we don't comment on each other's work, we don't criticize or compliment, we just hold the truth of what we're saying. And what that has taught me is that amazing things can happen in 10 minutes. We don't have to sit in front of computers for hours to be writers. And in fact, as I said, there's a kind of lack of self-care when we do that. So I write and I pause. And I think it's the same with other things in life where sometimes when we're not doing well, when we're feeling out of balance, we sometimes think that going down a rabbit hole will allow us to see something. And as everyone knows, my family is a big fan of rabbits, but they don't go down holes and stay there. They go down and they come up and they move all the time. So that's the lesson that I've learned over years of writing, is you can write in very small segments, you can pause, and when you find yourself pushing too much, you can learn to pause in other ways in life too.
Thank you so much. I have an imagery poet question. So when I was reading this book, as someone who's read all your poetry books as a super fan, as I was reading this one, I noticed the sun more, because I think I associate a lot of your writing with the moon. You have a collection called Moon Days, for one, and also in other poems I've noticed it. Why is the sun in this one more? One of my favorite lines is, the sun bleeds peach tea. Is in one of the poems. I can't remember the name of the poem, but you have a lot of these really beautiful sun images, and it seems really powerful in this book. And I was just wondering why it's more sun than moon for this collection.
It's interesting that you noticed that. I didn't consciously think about it, but for the Cherokee, the sun is a female. And I think as I've grown older and grown less connected to typically female roles in my life and stepped more into the light, I understand the sun as female now, because if you think about it, the moon is reflected in the night. It's a reflection. Who is still doing the work? It's the sun. Who does most of the work in our society? It's the women. So being in the light, coming into your power, those are some of the themes that I think come up in this book. And I think that's why there's more sun imagery than moon this time.
At the end of this book, you include writing prompts for each poem, sometimes with a starter of a line, sometimes with a question that's reflective. Can you explain why you included writing prompts in this collection?
Sure. I work as a writing coach. I also teach a class called Writing Wisdom on Insight Timer. And one of the students in that class, Iga, is here. It's so good to see you, Iga. And so in that class, I read one of my poems and then give a writing prompt. And the idea is that the poetry allows you to come into a space where you're not only working from the neck up, you're not only thinking, you're not only moving forward in a linear way, either remembering or planning the future, but you're more present in the way that you might be when you sit in meditation. And so having a prompt after you read a poem can be really helpful. You can write in your journal, you can write a poem of your own, you can use it to witness to what's happening in your life. And I wanted Swimming in Gilead to be that kind of book that you could not just receive, but also participate in and feel an equal voice in the dialogue.
I think it's really great. I think it also adds to accessibility too, because you have people who might be intimidated by poetry or not feel like they can engage with it. And then that's a way in with through their own writings. It's really great. So my next question is, how do you know when a piece is finished or ready? Like when it's time to put it down, it's time to send it out. How do you know when you're done with it?
Okay, so this is one of Coach Cass's lessons, and I'll try to sum it up very quickly, which is I can do in 3 words, which is service over ego. When we write, it can be very lonely and it can be very isolating, and yet paradoxically, the reason we're writing is to connect with others and to allow ourselves to be known and understood. All of that mostly takes place in a context of ego. Who am I? Who am I becoming? How do others see me? When will I be accepted? How can I get recognized? And when we stay in that cycle of ego, of focusing on ourselves, there is kind of a vortex around our work. You could call it a chrysalis. Something protects us, and it's as if the universe is saying to you, you're not ready. It's the exact opposite of what you want to hear at that stage as a writer. What happens as you continue writing, and this is just about practice. It's just 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, not every day. Sometimes life happens and you write once a week. That's fine. But as you practice, you start to realize that when you let go of your attachment to your work as your story, and you think of it as a form of service to others, what can they learn? How can they heal? What will allow them to understand themselves in a different way? How will this contribute to harmony in the world? The universe flips at that point, and the chrysalis opens and our work begins to fly. So it's different for every project, whether it's a poem or a book. But the idea is, if you're still in that place of ego, go ahead and keep the chrysalis around you, because there's healing and growth that needs to happen there. But when you're really ready to let it go into the world, you do it as a gift. If you've been given the gift of writing, then you give that gift back to the world, and it's no longer about you. As I read these poems, I remember what was happening autobiographically when I read them, but they're no longer about me. They're for you. That's the way that you know that it's ready.
Thank you. That was a wonderful way to crystallize that. Could you tell us what your process looks like for you as a writer? So where do you write? How do you write? How long? How often? What does it look like for you?
It varies. I have different seasons to my writing, but what stays common is that I write on this couch, and my dog is often right next to me. Those who work with me online know that he's often right next to me. It's evening now, so he's on the floor sleeping. And the birds, the trees, nature outside my window, going for a walk, all of this is part of my process. I don't feel alone when I write. I feel that nature collaborates with me to help me stay in that space of service.
a second. Cassie, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me?
Just went off my screen. Now I see you.
Okay.
Can you tell us what's coming next for you?
Yes, I'm excited because I have a novel coming out in November called Beaver Girl, and the release date for that is November 15th. And on October 15th, which is my grandson Sam's birthday, I will be starting a Kickstarter to help fund the book tour that I will do. And Beaver Girl tells the story of the keystone species, which is an environmental hero and can help us in the face of climate collapse that we are dealing with now. It's a dystopian, post-pandemic, post-civilization collapse, go out into the woods and how can you survive sort of adventure, but also with love and nature, and lots of science education too. So I think it'll be fun to have kind of a connection between classrooms and readers with that.
I think now we'll take some questions from my group here and from Zoom. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Do you all have any questions? Ronnie?
You didn't mind too, but I have a couple questions. I don't want to take away
Can
from
you hear
anybody
me?
else. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Your poetry is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Where does your creativity come from? Are you always inspired by someone or something? Or if you're not, how do you muster that creativity to write?
I was sort of born this way. I wrote my first novel at the age of 5, and I used to label my journals as a kid. Like, you know, I'm age 8 and this is the second of 3 journals this year, so that biographers would know if one went missing. So, you know, that head was what I was born with. But as I said, I go through seasons with my writing. Right now, I'm in a place where I'm putting out 2 books this year, and so I'm kind of offering those to the world. But I imagine that sometime late winter, early spring, I'll probably start to put feelers out. It's a kind of listening that I do, and I don't know what the next project will be, but I get myself into a place that's very receptive. For example, the novel Beaver Girl came to me when I was sitting on this couch knitting with my dog next to me, listening to Science Friday, and they had an interview with a woman named Emily Fairfax, who's a researcher who was sending drones up into the places in the West that had been devastated by wildfires. And she realized that the places where beaver colonies existed were these small green Edens where the fires hadn't destroyed anything. And the entire continent of North America used to be green and lush like this. Even places like Texas and New Mexico that we think of as deserts weren't. They were green, lush forests when there were beavers to create the wetlands that all of life depends upon. So I knew in that moment that that would be my next novel. And I went on Twitter, it was Twitter at the time, and asked for books to read and asked for help from people. And immediately, I didn't know what the story would be, but I knew that that was the seed for the story for me. And then the next morning, I took Lenny Bruce for a walk in the neighborhood. I have a 2-mile route that I do almost every day. And it goes by streams and ponds. And we went by what I called the big pond. And there was evidence of beavers in that pond, literally 1 mile from my house in an urban area, the day after I had the idea for the novel. So I just open myself up. And then after that, once I have that spark, then it's a question of doing research, letting the ideas percolate, kind of moving forward in a very methodical way, but knowing that that spark will drive me through the whole thing. Because, you know, I didn't come into this world to be a beaver advocate, you know, like as a kid, I didn't put that on when the teacher said, what do you want to be when you grow up? No, but I knew I wanted to be a writer. And so when the idea came to me to tell the story of the beavers, I knew that that would be an act of service for the world. And so I knew that my heart was aligned with what I was doing. And in the same way, Swimming in Gilead is aligned with the ethos of women from different places, different ways of life, coming together in very difficult times to support each other and to stay connected to their hearts and their creativity. I think my daughter-in-law Carol is raising her hand. So Carol, if you want to ask something, feel free to do that.
For seeing that, I can't see that with my eyes. I'm too short for the podium, so I can't see the top. So go ahead, Carol.
Actually, it's your stepdaughter who has the question.
Hi.
Hey, Laura.
I just finished putting the baby down, so I got to hear the past few minutes, and I really loved what you had to say about knowing when it's ready, because you're ready to let go of like the vulnerability that you have with the writing, and you're ready to let it be of service to others. And it's something that I really resonate with and still struggle with. So I'm hoping you could speak a little bit more about that, just because I found that just so compelling, how to balance, you know, the deeply vulnerable process of writing, and, you know, with sort of the reason you're writing it is part for yourself, but it's also for the world. And so how to navigate that, I mean, part of it's how to muster up the courage, right? And sort of framing it. And so anyway, I'm rambling now, but I just wanted you to talk more about that, because I really loved that comment.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. I think I'll go back to the first question that Casey asked me about how I balance everything. And I answered by talking about taking a pause. So there is, okay, so I talked about being open to the inspiration, getting the inspiration, then going into the research, the outlining, having a method, and then working on a regular basis. So that can take anywhere from, you know, a few weeks to a few years, as you allow yourself to pause between each writing session so that you're still caring for the self. You're not going down rabbit holes, pushing yourself, getting out of balance in terms of health. Then at that point, when you have a draft, I think what's really important is to step away from it. I say that we are writing for the people we are becoming, which means that we do not always understand the wisdom that we're writing as soon as we've written it. Another metaphor I would use is you don't want to criticize during sex. You want to wait till later when you're having tea together and talk about it. So when you have a draft right there, you don't want to criticize, edit, or cross out right then. That's a very vulnerable spot. Let yourself take a week, a month, a year. When you come back to it, read it as if you are the publisher. I call this reading with new eyes. When you read through the eyes of another, you're able to see, oh, I could say this more clearly. Okay, this one sentence actually needs to be a whole page. because it makes sense to me, but I did a lot of research in order to get to this point. So let me slow it down. One of my writing mentors, Louise DeSalvo, who lives in my heart every day, she used to look at a sentence and she would say, give me 10 pages on that. That might not go into the writing, but what she's saying is unpack it, tell the story of it. Is there any dialogue in it? What else isn't in there? When you're looking at your work with new eyes, what's happening is not only are you able to kind of, you know, make the changes and get it ready to put out into the world in a way that feels good and of service, as you were saying, but you're actually practicing reading it from the perspective of the person who now holds that wisdom. And that takes time. The Eastern Cherokee writer Mary Lou Aliakta used to say, when you plant a seed, you can't dig it up right away. That's not how growth happens. So you might want to have projects at different stages so that there's something that you're returning to regularly, something that you finished a month ago that you can then look at with new eyes. And then as time goes on, something that's going out into the world that you can do a reading for or take to a conference, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I see my mother has raised her hand, Casey, so we can call on her. If you want to unmute yourself, feel free to.
Why don't you have to unmute yourself to ask the question?
So, am I on?
Yes.
You are.
Okay, I just want to ask a question. And that is, Cassie, how do you get the deep reservoir to know in yourself that this is ready to give to others? How do you tap into it, in other words?
What I was talking about earlier in terms of service over ego,
Yes.
that you see it in the context of the larger universe, not only in terms of what's happening now in current events terms or in the writing world or philosophical coming and going, but you think of yourself as part of a community where you are contributing to the dialogue, but you don't expect to be the main voice.
I see. Thank you.
Guys have another question in here?
One just point to clarify, it won't make sense unless I clarify this. For your book, Swimming in Gilead,
Yes.
is it a collection of a group of people, or is this your collection?
It's my collection, but my writing group is called Sisters of Gilead. I see Mona is here. Wonderful to see your beautiful face, Mona. We started meeting as a small group during an online class taught by Natalie Goldberg right at the very beginning of the pandemic. It was just completely luck and fate that brought us together. 3 of us live in the United States, 3 in Canada, 2 are women of color, 4 are white women, 5 are lesbian, and 1 is straight. We had some affirmative action going there. And we meet once a week. We've continued to meet every week. And we sit for 5 minutes in meditation, and then we take turns being the leader, which means that we bring 2 prompts for writing. We give 1 prompt. It could be something as simple as my favorite tree, or it could be a question, like one of the questions at the end of Swimming in Gilead is, in what ways did the pandemic change you? And then we set a timer for 10 minutes and we write by hand writing by hand creates the same brain waves as meditation. So it's a very nurturing space that we're in. And when time is up, then the 6 of us go around and each person reads. You can always pass if you're not in a place where you feel like sharing. And we just say thank you and we move on to the next person. I talked a little bit earlier about Natalie Goldberg's philosophy is that in this way, you learn to tell the absolute truth to yourself on the page by telling the truth to others without a fear of being criticized or judged or even complimented. And so I've always resonated with that teaching style because I think it doesn't really, if you have 10 kindergartners who can't tie their shoes, what good is it to put them in a room together and tell them to teach each other to tie shoes? Like you need to be able to sit down with yourself and practice tying shoes. That's what happens. You can't go around criticizing each other's tying methods as a way of learning. So I hope that answered your question. Yes, these are all my poems, but the book is dedicated to the women in my writing group, Colleen, Lantien, Mona, Shirley, and Vanessa, the Gilead sisters.
So I was just wondering if with all the content that you have, how do you narrow down what actually makes the cut?
So I did something very specific with this book of poetry, which is that I knew that I wanted it to be about this time in history, the time of the pandemic, Trump, police violence, all of the things that we lived through. I don't even think that we really have come to terms with it yet, or I don't know if we ever will. But my idea as I went through each of the writings was to ask, is this about this time specifically historically? So I had a very limited historical look at what I wanted to be in the book. And did it teach people how to swim? That is, did each poem have a turn that allows a reader to say, oh, that could be a model, not only for getting through or not only for resisting what's happening,
There you go.
thriving in it.
It's okay.
Does that help?
It does, yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us, and I love the poem about refugees. And the first one. And the question I have you ever struggled to put on paper? Like, is it a topic or something you struggled on putting it on paper, like about it or express things?
The answer is yes. And so this may answer the question a bit indirectly, but I'll start with the answer and then pause to see if you think I'm going in the right direction for you. As I said before, one of my hats is as a trauma scholar. And so scholars of trauma have found that it's very difficult for people to witness to a trauma as long as it's ongoing. There has to be a sense of borders and safety around the experience. We have to feel somehow that it's over in order to be able to tell the story. Until that moment, we have the after effects of trauma, but not necessarily a narrative with it. So let me pause. Is that kind of along the lines of what you were asking?
I just want to know if you ever struggled, because I always struggle and like sometimes I feel, I have a feeling about something, but I can't put it on paper.
Mm,
I read it in my mind, I read it in my heart.
mhm, mhm.
I,
I think when something is very big or very painful, or you're feeling a lot of heaviness or struggle with it, there are other things that can allow you a sense of practice. So let's say, here's Lenny, he finally joined us. As my writing companion, I sometimes would think, how will I deal with the grief when he's gone? Well, maybe that's too much for me to write about now. So I will choose something else. A teacup that my wife gave me that I smashed one day by accident. What can I say about that teacup? How does that help me practice putting words on what I'm trying to convey without going directly into the wound? And that's the beautiful thing about writing. What is a metaphor? A metaphor is taking one thing and comparing it to another. By writing about the smashed teacup, I can access my anticipatory grief about Lenny getting older. And even if you're not a dog person, you understand what it means to lose something that you didn't want to lose. So the metaphor, the connection between one and the other, is how we make meaning. It is at its very essence what all writing is. This is like this. So to answer your question, if you wanted me to be your writing coach for 1 second, I would say, don't write about what you struggle with. Ask yourself, what is this like? Is it like a bird? Is it like a tree? Is it like a teacup? Is it like a song you just heard? And write about that.
Good, wow.
good advice.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. We have time for one more question.
We're just sitting here saying, oh my gosh, she's so great. She's so smart. She's so good. She's our Gaga too, which is so lucky.
I feel like I'm in church.
Yeah, we're at the church of Cassie Premo Steele tonight.
For those who don't know, this is Laura and Carol, my stepdaughter and daughter-in-law, the moms of Sam and Ellis, our grandkids, who are the lights of our lives. So, yeah, we're so very great. They live here in South Carolina near us, which is truly such a blessing in this world where people scatter all the time. We get to have family nearby, and my mother is also in South Carolina, and Anne Marie is here, even though she's not on the are you on the picture? There she is. Yay. Anne Marie was the publisher of 4 of my books of poetry. So I'm very grateful to have you here.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Cassie, for your beautiful poems and for your wisdom about your craft and the world. I'm really honored to be asked to do this. Thanks to Yellow Arrow for including me. Thank you all for your questions. And Cassie, can you just let us know where to find you on social media and where to find the book?
Sure. To purchase the book, you can go to Yellow Arrow Publishing, and you can just Google that, or there's also a link to the book in the chat. My website is my name, so you can just type in Cassie Premo Steele. I'm on X and Facebook and Instagram, but you can also message me directly through the website. So feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or want to get to know me more or want to follow up from something, want to invite me to read. I will be doing some book tour visits this fall and also next spring and summer. So be in touch with me if you want to know more about that. And I think that's it. I'm so very grateful to have all of you here. Thank you for putting up with the online format, but I really wanted all my friends and family and writing friends to be able to join me from all around the world. Iga was here with us from Poland. I think she was the one to come in from the furthest distance. And I'm just very grateful to see you all and to be with you all here tonight.
Thank you so much, Cassie. You guys have a good night.
Thank you all.
Cassie, can you share how to pre-order Beaver Girl?
It's not available for pre-order yet, but the Kickstarter starts on Sam's birthday, October 15th. So I will be putting the link to that on all my social media and the website on October 15th. And tonight is Ellis's 8-month birthday. So I guess my final parting word would be that if you're struggling with your writing, wait until you become a grandmother, and then you can put all your auspicious days on the grandkids' birthdays. Bye, everyone.